welcome back to another episode of Lost Lords. This is our final episode of this course, Secure Transactions, and before we move on to some new content. So we are finishing up our discussion on enforcement. In this episode, we are going to discuss enforcing against obligations owed to the debtor. So typically, the debtor is kind of this intermediate, well, not typically, but occasionally a debtor is this intermediate kind of party where the secure party 1 is owed a debt by the debtor, and then the debtor is owed a debt by other debtors. And so ultimately, it's a question of what can secured party 1 recover those debts directly by going to the debtor's debtors. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. It's fairly straightforward. I'll give you an example. Accounts. And when I say accounts, I mean like accounts receivable in the financial world. This is essentially debts that are owed to the debtor. In this kind of situation, the debtor may have their accounts established as collateral to satisfy the debt that the creditor ended up loaning them. The creditor, if they want to recover their collateral based off of those, the debt that is owed to it, the debtor might not have money in that accounts receivable yet, because most people, if you think about a retail, they're going to pay with credit. And if they're paying with credit, that means they might not have received the money yet. They are just anticipating receiving that money. And so that goes into what is known as accounts receivable. So this account is considered collateral that is secured by the secured party, but it's also a debt that is owed to the debtor. There's no value in this collateral until that debt to the debtor has ultimately been paid. So how does the secured party enforce against this obligation that is owed to the debtor? And the answer is pretty straightforward. It's just by notifying the account debtor. That's the people who are paying their credit to the debtor. So you can skip the middleman and go straight to the account and debtor. There are several types of collateral that falls into this situation. I just explained one of them. The first type of collateral is accounts. Second type of collateral is chattel paper. Third type of collateral are instruments. And fourth type of collateral are payment intangibles. So how do you notify the account debtor? Since that's the requirement to basically collect on this collateral that you're owed as the secured party. Article 9, Section 404A discusses payment amounts. Article 9, 406A, and 607A affects who payments need to be made to. And ultimately what those say is the secured party must notify the account debtor that the payment is now due to the secured party rather than the debtor. And the only way the account debtor can resolve the obligation to the debtor is by paying the secured party. So the account debtor should do, the whole point of this is the account debtors need to do little research to avoid, actually they should do some research to avoid paying twice, because you don't want to accidentally pay the debtor and then paying the secured party as well. Instead, you want to go straight to the secured party. And so you need to do a little bit of research to make sure that what the party is claiming is true, and so on and so forth. The second thing that needs to be disclosed, notifying the account debtor, is that the secured party can distribute some of the collections to the debtor if agreed upon in the security agreement. A debtor is likely to agree to this type of arrangement where the secured party just collects directly from the accounted debtor because the secured party has more experience collecting, and they can collect for cheaper, which ultimately benefits the debtor because that means their obligation, their payment their debt is being satisfied quicker and cheaper. Additionally, if the debtor does default, then having this arrangement at the beginning helps maintain the relationship that debtor has with customers. And I mean, that makes straightforward sense too, because if the debtor is struggling and defaults, well, then the secured party just reaches out to the consumers, and it almost seems as if the debtor did not have anything to do with that. But that's everything from this semester. In this episode, we talked about what to do if you've got this obligation where the debtor is set to receive an obligation from other debtors, and how that can be used to satisfy the debt of the credit of the secured party. Okay. That's secure transactions. We talked about a ton throughout the semester. Lots of things that we focused on. Just briefly to walk through, give you a little bit of a table of contents. The first thing we focused on this semester was attachment. The attachment requirements, the type of collateral that can be attached. How do you attach that collateral? And then we talked about perfection. The financing statement being the primary method of perfection. And then we talked about other perfection methods, maintaining perfection. And then we focused on priority. When you've got multiple creditors, who wins? Who wins between a lien creditor and other parties? Who wins between secured parties? Who wins if there is a buyer of the collateral when there is a secured party? And then we also talked about super priorities and PIMSs. And then finally, we closed the semester out with enforcement. We talked about what happens if there is a default and how recovery and disposition is made. And then we focused in these past 2 episodes on full and partial acceptance, and then enforcing against obligations owed to the debtor. That's everything that we focused on this semester, at least a bird's eye view of everything that we focused on during the semester. It's been a pleasure, and I will talk to you all in the next content. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Law Schoolers Podcast. If you enjoyed the show or the material shared on the Law Schoolers website, you can support Law Schoolers by becoming a patron at patreon.com/lawschoolers. I also wanted to provide a quick disclaimer. Nearly all Law Schoolers material is unedited due to the sake of time and a desire to keep the content as raw as possible. Additionally, the material is only provided for educational purposes and is not to be used as legal advice. If the material is used as legal advice, Law Schoolers is not liable for any legal outcomes. Thank you again for enjoying the show.